the Early Health Technology Assessment, or eHTA platform, is the newest of the NMIN core facilities. And it's based out of the Lynn Lab at UBC Pharmaceutical Sciences. And we're just starting up at the moment. And one of the things we're looking forward to and have started doing is engaging with the NMIN community, try to get a sense of how we can best help the community to move their products in development along towards commercialization. In fact, our core mission is to support the translation of NMIN-funded technologies into patient care by helping life science and technology teams to incorporate and use eHTA to inform their research and development and commercialization decisions and activities. Over the next couple of months, we'll be presenting at least 2 webinars where we provide a lot more detail on health technology assessment, eHTA, and how we think we can help you do that. But for today, I have 3 objectives for this presentation. First is to give you an overview of health technology assessment and cost effectiveness analysis in particular. Link that to the rationale for using eHTA to inform R&D and commercialization decision making, and then provide some details on specifically how the platform can help your team. So with that said, what is early health technology assessment? In short, it primarily refers to the use of health economics methods such as cost effectiveness analysis very early in the development life cycle for a new therapeutic or a new diagnostic product, and primarily to try to estimate its potential value to a variety of stakeholders under different scenarios, and the potential impact of that product coming to market on those stakeholders. And as I'm sure you're aware of, the healthcare market is fairly complex, with a number of different stakeholders, whether they be patients, physicians, hospitals, payers, scientists, innovators, investors. And it's complex in that the users, the patients, and the physicians are often not the stakeholders that are paying for the technology directly. And all of these stakeholders play an important part in the product's commercial success. So for example, if physicians generally are skeptical of your new drug for whatever reason, or the value of a new drug, and don't prescribe it, it's not going to do very well in terms of sales and market penetration. And if there's a reason to think that that's going to happen, it's not going to be a very attractive investment for investors at an early stage. So in the case of cost effectiveness analysis and eHTA specifically, the primary stakeholder we're focused on is payers. And payers are the public or private health insurers or health plans, health systems that usually pay directly for healthcare services or technologies, even in primarily private systems like the US. And the rationale underlying eHTA and using that is that by performing cost effectiveness analysis and eHTA early in the product's development, even and especially when the uncertainty about the product's features, its effectiveness, its potential safety profile is high, we can help to quantify which features will be value drivers for payers and other stakeholders, and potentially inform the subsequent development decisions to try to ensure that the product is both valued by users and provides good value for money for payers. And the idea here is that this will help de-risk the development program and make it more attractive for investors or partners and other organizations that might be involved. And why focus on payers early on is not the only thing to focus on, but it's pretty important because ultimately cost effectiveness and so estimates of cost effectiveness and estimates of budget impact are key drivers of reimbursement decision making by payers. And to the extent that a new product under development looks like it's probably not going to be very cost effective or have budget impact that's not scaled to its population health benefit, is going to struggle to get reimbursement. And if that can be seen early on, again, that's going to make the product less, the project less attractive to partners or investors. So the idea is to try to find that sweet spot where you're providing, you will set yourself up to provide the greatest value to payers and to at the end of the line. So just to zoom out for a minute, this slide provides some broader context on why this is important. So it shows the historical growth in the percent of GDP spent on healthcare in some major economies over the last 50 years. If you look, between 1970 and 2010, the percentage of GDP spent on healthcare either doubled from 4 to 6% to about 10 to 12% in most major economies, or nearly tripled. Like in the US, it went from 6% in 1970 to about 16% in 2010. The other thing to note is that after 2010, that growth seems to have plateaued. And there's many reasons that many explanations for that. But one of them is that around then, that's when a lot of different health systems started to implement active efforts to try to control that growth in costs, because it was just getting out of hand, and because it was hitting the limit of what health systems and societies were willing to pay. So for example, in Canada, it's close to 40% of provincial spending is on healthcare. And there is going to be a limit. You can't go to 100%. There's a lot of other important priorities. And this puts significant pressure on health systems to increase their efficiency and ensure that new services and technologies provide value for money. Because if there is a relatively fixed budget, or a budget that just grows very slowly, but a constant pressure to incorporate new technologies, some of which are very costly, not all of these can be funded. And so health systems have to choose. And this is what provides an impetus for the increasing use of cost effectiveness analysis and health technology assessment in general, which includes cost effectiveness analysis, but also other types of research and evaluation frameworks. And because it provides a decision-making framework through which to maximize the health benefits for the covered population with an essentially fixed budget and using an evidence-based approach. So just to give you an example of the type of new technologies that are driving these concerns about reimbursement and controversy, this example is Zolgensma, the Novartis gene therapy for type 1 spinal muscular atrophy, which has a list price, or had a list price of $2.1 million US on market entry in 2019, or about $2.8 million Canadian dollars. It's pretty expensive. Now, a high price tag doesn't necessarily rule out that payers will want to reimburse that at that price point, because ultimately, if it has a very large health benefit, that might still be good value for money. And the willingness to pay of payers for a given unit of health benefit, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a couple of minutes, varies. And in some cases, for example, when talking about rare diseases or orphan drugs, the willingness to pay tends to be higher than in other areas. And as it happens, Zolgensma is actually quite effective, and in fact, fairly cost effective given the price. But a key concept in understanding why this is a concern and why health systems use economic evaluation to inform coverage decisions is the question of opportunity cost. And specifically what this means is the opportunity cost of funding a technology like Zolgensma is the health benefits that are foregone that could have been generated by investing those resources in alternative therapies or services. So for example, $2.8 million in BC gets you Zolgensma for one patient, statins for 14,000 patients, or for a year, or a hospital stay for 456 patients. And a key question here is whether the health benefit generated by treating that one patient is actually larger than the health benefit that could be generated through other uses of those resources. And economic evaluation methods provide a way to quantitatively compare that across clinical areas. So just briefly, we can talk very long about this, but a brief summary or a recap of the logic of cost effectiveness analysis, if you're not familiar or not intimately familiar with it. So basically, the goal is to compare alternative courses of action. So you might compare B versus A, and B being using the new drug therapy for that specific population, versus A, the comparator. And the comparator could be another new therapy that's also come online recently, an existing therapy, or in the case of, or it could be just standard of care, which often might just be supportive care. For example, in the case of a lot of rare diseases, there are no therapies that at present that directly address the disease. And the goal here is to compare the A and B based on their costs, so that the resources used to deliver the care in question, and on their consequences, which in the case of cost effectiveness analysis primarily refers to the target population's health status. And I'll just point to two key metrics. One is the quality adjusted life year, which is a way to capture, so QALY, a way to capture the effect of a health intervention on both the length and quality of life of patients at the same time. And I don't have time to go into the details today, but the key advantage of using QALYs is that it provides a metric that you can compare across clinical areas fairly easily in most areas of healthcare. The other is the ICER, or incremental cost effectiveness ratio. And that's basically a key output statistic, a measure of efficiency, which is calculated by dividing the difference in costs between the two scenarios, basically your two uses of those funds, and by the difference in outcomes. And that outputs quantities like, for example, $245,000 per QALY gain. So there it's suggesting that by using B instead of A, you will generate more health benefit, and that'll cost $245,000 per QALY that is gained relative to the status quo or the comparator. In itself, that doesn't necessarily tell you all that much or give you a good way to make a decision, but it's an important, that's one of the key metrics that is incorporated into decision making. So one decision rule, for example, involves establishing a formal willingness to pay threshold. So above which, if the ICER comes in above that, you're not going to fund it. If it comes in below that, you will fund it, because you're saying at that threshold that represents good value for money. So NICE, the Health Technology Assessment Agency in the UK, tends to establish, actually has a formal threshold at 20 to 30,000 pounds per QALY. Although there's some flexibility in that in some areas. Mostly though, payers don't tend to have formal thresholds like that, although informal thresholds in the US and Canada are in the $50,000 to $150,000 per QALY range. And it's also important to note that ICERs and efficiency is not the only factor that is considered by payers. There are others, like, for example, the availability of alternative therapies, the level of unmet need, and maybe whether the therapy is an ultra rare disease. That said, cost effectiveness does impact reimbursement decisions, even in systems like the US, where it's primarily composed of private health insurers. So this presents some data from a recent paper in Pharmacoeconomics, in which they found that specialty drugs with ICERs that were greater than $50,000 per QALY were about twice as likely to either be rejected for coverage or be covered with substantial restrictions versus drugs that actually had a QALY or an ICER below 50,000 per QALY. So in effect, cost effectiveness provides a framework for both public and private insurers to estimate what the fair price for a drug is likely to be and what they're likely to accept. So value-based pricing. And this can be very useful during the commercial development of a new drug or medical product. The trouble, of course, is that early on, there is a lot of uncertainty about particularly the clinical parameters. So like the effectiveness, safety, or even the indication or target population that a product under development is likely to go for. And so therefore, a lot of uncertainty about its eventual cost effectiveness. So that's the whole point of eHTA, is to explore that space of uncertainty and help to characterize what the drivers of value might be, and what and help to inform which indication to pick, help to inform what to focus on in terms of maximizing the value of the product. These are some examples of the types of analyses you can do based on cost effectiveness modeling. So headroom analysis, threshold analysis, and there are others, some of which are more complex. Ultimately, there are a lot of ways in which you can use this type of analysis to inform drug development. One that we think is particularly likely to be important is indication screening for nanomedicine technology platforms. So if you have a new technology platform, maybe a new delivery system, what should be the first indication you go for, right? So there'll be a lot of considerations, obviously, that go into that, but one of them might be like, how big is the maximum potential market? And that's where headroom analysis can be very useful. There are a lot of other use cases, and we're, this is part of our engagement of what we're trying to do is trying to understand what the most important use cases are for the NMIN community, and maybe there's some we haven't thought of. So please do reach out if you have any thoughts already. In terms of what we're doing specifically, our platform activities involve, as I just mentioned, community engagement. And so we're trying to get an understanding of how we can help, but also to promote awareness of eHTA, such as I've just been doing, and to build ultimately HQP's capacity to both use and maybe even conduct health technology assessment as part of their work going forward. And the goal is for that to lead to collaborative grant applications between the platform and the life science research teams to, for example, NMIN's strategic initiatives commercialization program, but also potentially to other outside opportunities to fund eHTA studies or incorporate eHTA into the project. In terms of the specific services we're providing, so we provide initial consultations where we can try to explore what the specific team's needs are and how we might go about addressing those. Those are free to NMIN-funded teams. Also grant development, as I just mentioned, so developing grant applications together. We also can provide a planning workshop, lead a planning workshop within your research group, where we do a more detailed overview of eHTA methods and study options, and co-design a potential eHTA project with the study team, which could then flow into a grant development grant application. And then there's contract research, which there's the traditional contract research where basically we do the study for you in collaboration, but based on your needs. But then also we're trying to develop a new model where our platform team provides resources, coaching, and quality assurance, but to facilitate the life science teams themselves taking the lead in doing things like heteronym analysis, for example, at an early stage when trying to decide which indication to go for. And if you have any questions or think that you could already can think of anything that we could help you in terms of your research and development and commercialization efforts, please reach out and please stay tuned for a webinar series. So that's my email address. You can also find me online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. And it's my pleasure to welcome the eHTA team to NMIN. What a fabulous opportunity, and what an example of something that we could only do working together, but would be unable to do working alone in our own labs. To have this depth of economics analysis in the network is such a privilege for us and such a wonderful opportunity for our scientists. So we're just all so pleased that Dr. Lind, yourself, Elizabeth, and the rest of the team have joined our network.
I was just so excited to attend this session today because I just think it's actually quite phenomenal when you look at the three platforms and the opportunity that they provide to our community. And this is obviously the newest platform, and I'm just super excited about it. This is something that I'll be attending the webinars, Nick. I'm going to be your #1 student. Hopefully I'll be right in the front row, so to speak. But, you know, I think as an academic in particular, we often, increase the degree of complexity as a means to achieve novelty, which may get us into a better journal as an example, but also makes whatever it is that we're developing more complex, perhaps less likely to be easily scaled and manufactured. The cost often then increases. So we're not thinking about all of the things that you just talked about. So I just think I encourage all of the trainees and even PIs, and I said I'll be there myself, to try to, just be like little sponges and absorb as much of the knowledge, from this platform in particular, I think, as you can, because I do believe, one of the goals of this network, maybe the goal, is to develop nanomedicines that truly make, a meaningful impact on human health. So we can do all the research in the world, great things in the lab, maybe they look great in animals, but if they actually can't be successfully translated to the clinic and commercialized, then to some extent it's all for naught. So I really just see this as being extremely valuable. So thank you so much, Nick, Dr. Lind, Elizabeth. We're just delighted to have you with us.